Hello again everybody and welcome back to Dark Souls 3. So we came all the way down to the Profaned capital, and I know it's tempting to move on because the Profaned capital is supposedly the place where Yorm is, which is our next old one, and he is somewhere here, as far as we know. And down there we would be able to get further into the capital, but for the time being we're not gonna go there. Because there's a small bit left to explore. Well, part of the capital, small part, and another small part of the dungeon. And then there's some stuff that we couldn't access in the dungeon before, like, remember all those locked doors? We will get a means to actually enter those. Over the course of this video, anyway. We could have gone down those stairs, but there's nothing really down there. Unless I'm horribly misremembering things, but I think not. And what we find up there is an item which we could of course see from inside as well. There's rusted coins and then there's golden coins, and both of those increase our item find. They are very limited in supply for the most part, and you'll have to use them wisely. Just use them somewhere where there's something that you absolutely want, or if you need to farm, I don't know, Titanite or something, use them really when you absolutely need to find something specific, actually. Sometimes there's specific equipment that you might want, or whatever. It bears mentioning, though, that these crystal lizards, they don't drop anything based on your item find. As far as I'm aware, they always have the same drops. And there's nothing extra that they drop. That's probably due to the fact that they are a one-time only spawn, or rather they can be killed once. And then they don't spawn again. They will of course spawn over and over provided you don't kill them. Which of course means you don't get the item that they hold, which is always upgrade material, which of course is always handy. And remember last time when I told you there wouldn't be any of those weird spiders? Well, can you hear that crawling here? Yeah, in this part there will be the spiders. They are probably among the freakiest enemies in this game. And the fact that there's blooming purple moss clumps here can only mean that that swamp bit down there, well, that's actually toxic and not poison. Poison being, well, poison as we know it, and toxic is a stronger variant of it. In this game, however, poison is, well, it's a hassle, but it's not really too much of a threat. And the same actually applies to toxic, only it's more dangerous than poison, obviously. But it's not as deadly as it was in Dark Souls 1, where it was basically a death sentence if you didn't have any purple moss clumps, or rather purple blooming moss clumps. Oh well, but some waiting sometimes can actually make it so you don't get toxic. Because I'm impatient, and for the sake of the LP, of course, I sacrifice a bit of health. It's not much of a problem anyway, as you can see. I may lose a lot of health here, but that's mainly due to the fact that I just got killed by a spider. Revenge. Yeah, you usually lose a lot of health if you get toxic, but it's not really too much. Like, you can deal with it. It's basically around similar to the amount of damage that you took from poison in the first two games. Somewhere in between, maybe, but it's not really as bad as toxic used to be. The main reason, of course, for going down into the swamp would be to get these items in there in the little cave. We could have also dropped down there if we felt like it. You know, in the room with the narrow hallways and one crystal lizard, there were holes in the ground, and if we had dropped into one of those, or rather the one that was there, we would have ended up in the room ahead of us. The best way to go about this is basically just, you know, run in. there's not much of a problem. And while you are slowed down by the muck, you can just press the run button and run as normal. And you don't even have to use stamina for it. It's not like you'll sprint, of course, but you will run at a normal speed, which is good enough. You could, of course, also roll or bring a quick step weapon to do it, but hey. And yeah, because I don't want to actually waste my purple moss clumps for when I might actually need them, I kind of like to just tank it and use some S's instead. Because S's I can get back easily. Purple moss I'd have to buy or find. And it's fairly rare to find, and buying it, you know, costs money or other souls. Which could be used otherwise. But hey, I guess if you need purple moss clumps or purple blooming moss clumps, it's absolutely fine to spend money for it. It's actually a bit of a flaw on my playstyle that I very rarely use consumables or spend money to get them, because they can be fairly useful. And yes, there is more to that swamp down there, a tiny bit, but it's best to get up here first, at least in my experience, because there's a quick way down to that rest of the swamp that requires us, or doesn't require us to go down to the swamp. And yeah, there was a weird enemy inside there. We'll be seeing it. But I also think it's best to, you know, attack that enemy from a different direction. And this guy wields the, I forget what it's called at this moment, but they wield the weapon of the gargoyles. Which is actually, you know, on fire. And it is always worth it to kill him, because you get a really nice reward for it. Which, of course, is only useful if you're a spellcaster. Because, you know, that guy there is a spellcaster, in case you couldn't tell. And of course, you need to keep in mind that you can't fall down here easily, because I just died nearly, and... Okay. I don't know where he fell, but he fell. Now, since you don't know where he is, let's just quickly reload the area to get his items back where he spawned. And this is now a complete Let's Play. Here, this is the title screen. Look at it. It's a very important aspect of my LPs. They show the title screens. And here it is. I hope you enjoyed it. Anyway, we're back, and as promised, the item that he dropped are here. Logan's Scroll. It is a scroll that was apparently written by Big Head Logan. Which, of course, is a very prominent sorcerer from the first game. He was quite legendary, actually. He was rumored to be several hundred years old, or rather 100 years old about. And even though, you know, we actually talked to him, he seemed to be, you know, relatively sane. He could still walk, he was kind of healthy. Old, but, you know, he could manage. And meanwhile, we are cheesing the shit out of that enemy. Because those can be quite troublesome. Under the wrong circumstances. They not only take quite a lot of hits, they also have a grab that can just outright kill you. But you know, sometimes you just get lucky. By this point I've killed so many mimics that I don't even think about fighting them anymore. And this one gives us another bit that is somewhat related to Logan, the Court Sorcerer's Staff. It's not Logan's staff, but it's modeled after Logan's staff. And that's one of the better staffs if you use an intelligence-based build to cast sorceries. Depending on what stats you have, it might be more useful to pick a different staff, but that's just getting into min-maxing territory here. And hey, see that part here? That window? Yep, we can do that. And this is actually something that I missed on my first playthrough. Until the end, of course, when I found this and was happy to find my old buddy, Sigurd. And it's also home to a very useful ring, the covetous gold serpent ring, which simply increases item find.
Ah, you are a saint. Once again, you are my valiant savior. I, Siegfried of Katarina, express my deepest gratitude. Take this, a token of my thanks. Go on, it's all yours. Ah, no, please. Go on ahead. I've my own road to take, and a duty to fulfill. Very soon.
So, this is not necessarily the end of Sigurd's questline, there's one more step involved, but usually you get a Titanite slab at the end of a questline. You just happen to get it one step early. Anyway, it's time to wrap this lower part here up. We could go up here now, but as you might remember, there was a bit more down to that swamp, so let's just go down there. And I find the simplest way to get there is to, you know, drop not necessarily in this spot, but rather here, because there's a bit of a roof here that can break your fall easily. And just reduce fall damage, because that fall, I don't think it would have necessarily killed us, but it would have been fairly damaging to us. I don't think I've talked about this yet, but a shriving stone can be used to remove a weapon infusion. So, if you say don't like your raw weapon infusion on the Astora's Greatsword for whatever reason, you can use a shriving stone to get rid of it. And of course, infuse again with something else if you wish. Alright, so there's a bit of a door ahead of us. And it's best to be prepared for this room, because it's quite something. Yeah, you remember that one guy that we fought, that really freaky face hand? 3 of them in one room. And while there really isn't much of a reason to kill all 3 of them, I thought, why not? One of them actually drops something specific that just, you know, ends up in your inventory as you kill him. But the other 2 you could just leave alive and collect whatever is in the room and, you know, be done with it, leave. And since that room in there is fairly tight, it might not be the best choice to fight in there. Of course, if you have to fight 3 of them, if you're out here, it might not be too good of an idea to do it either, but hey. It is, at least in my opinion, easier. And I'm not quite sure which one actually dropped the Eleonora, which is an axe, but I think it was the one nearest to the door, unless I'm mistaken. I might be mistaken, of course. Could also be the middle one, or the one at the end. In any case, you'll probably kill at least one other one usually before you get that weapon. Unless you know specifically which one to go for and just focus them down. And this area is home to freaky enemies, and we have these spiders and those guys now. And they're a bit reminiscent of Bloodborne to me, because they have a ton of eyes everywhere. Like in their stomach mainly. And while the Bloodborne thing was mainly to line your brain with eyes, there were tons of things that just had eyes everywhere. And that's a grab, for sure. Like I said, I'm not sure those are actually eyes, but it just kind of looks like it. Anyway, thankfully, those guys don't respawn. So we don't have to fight the other 2 anymore. We can just focus on one guy. And be relatively safe, because we don't have to go down into the poisonous muck. And can just do it in here relatively easily. And they do drop dung pie, which, as we've already mentioned, is literal shit. And it's a bit of a joke in Dark Souls that gross-looking enemies tend to drop those. But well, we're done down there for now. Rather, forever, actually. There's nothing down there anymore that would interest us. And here's a bit of a dig move. This message is very helpful. And this is the only time that those guys show up invisible. What's supposed to happen is that you walk down that hallway here to the end and they will walk towards you. But since we know how to deal with them ahead of time, of course, you know, we can just do that instead. Not that those two would be too much of a problem under those circumstances, but hey. We did get the Jailer string out of that whole, you know, detour here. And we can now open every door in the dungeon. And if you recall, in the dungeon there was a big-ass giant. It is that very same one just ahead of us. Of course, it's not as simple as just going down, beating them up, because there's rats. Now, those rats by themselves aren't too much of a problem either, because the giant can actually kill those rats with his attacks. The problem is that there's just a lot of rats. They come from those little rat holes. They don't spawn infinitely, but there is a fair number of them. Not as many that you'd think they're infinite, though. They stop spawning at just the right moment. Yep, that's how we've dealt with giants in the cathedral, too. Maybe this gives us a bit of a chance to talk about our weapon choice. The S-Talk. Well, the S-Talk is a thrusting sword, and thrusting swords in general are fairly good, in my opinion. While the moveset is really limited, most thrusting swords just have thrusts and nothing else. The S-Talk actually has a bit of a slash-to-heavy attack as well, which can be useful. But even with just thrusts, it's a fairly useful weapon type, because the thrusts come out really fast, and you can just rack up damage really quickly. Of course, the main problem is that you won't be able to take multiple enemies at once unless they are lined up just right. Aside from that, really good weapon. It's one of the basic weapons I really just like using when I'm playing, say, a caster build who can't rely as much on physical damage, or rather from scaling from physical weapon damage. So I just like to infuse it with, I don't know, raw or something, whatever benefits the most at the time. I tend to be more flexible in that regard. But I do prefer pure physical damage, because the elemental infusions aren't really too worth it in my opinion. At least the magic ones aren't. Hey, look at that, yet another mimic. There sure are a lot down there. And I suppose if you really wanted to, you could just kill a mimic with poison without waking it up. Though I'm not sure if it would actually wake up after a bit. I haven't tried. It would take too long in my opinion, and being scared of mimics isn't worth it because they're fairly easy to fight. And at this point in the game, you really shouldn't have any trouble with them anymore. Because all they do is just, you know, they kick you, they punch you, they sometimes try to eat you, but as long as you circle around them, you should be safe. But oh well. So now we are actually up here. And we could drop back down to where that crystal lizard used to be and actually, you know, kill him. And maybe we should do that. Because there he is. And there's also some soul. A Titanite chunk is nice, by the way. This Titanite chunk might just be what you need to get your weapon up to +7. Because I'm not sure, there might be a Titanite chunk before in the game at this point, but it might not be as easily accessible as this one. So if you want to wake up the giant early, you could just get it slightly sooner, I suppose. Anyway, we drop back down to where the giant, you know, was standing to get access to this elevator. There really isn't much of a point in us doing that at this time, but we can't do it, so we do it. Because all it does is it gives us access to the first bonfire in the area again. So now we've come full circle, but of course this is just mainly there to remind you that, hey, okay, I'm back in the dungeon now. Oh, locked doors everywhere. Let's try to find and open them. This first one's hardly worth it though. The other ones are a bit more lucrative. Basically just killing him for good measure. So this is down by that one spot. The room opposite of the room with the 3 jailers, I believe. And it did give us some ashes, and the ashes are always nice because they make the handmaidens sell more stuff. And we're now, of course, back in this freaking room, which I hate. But right by where we found Alva's set, there is a door here, which we need a key for, which is why I didn't come here sooner. But I really did want to actually get the key before going through the trouble of getting here. Because there is an NPC in here.
Oh, there you are. I thought you'd all but forgotten me. How sweet. Good to know that a skinny little heretic can still turn heads. Oh, you're not one of them, are you? Accept my apologies for mistaking you for one of those leeches. So, what business have you here? This is a land of monstrosities, and I am no exception. You're here to save me, but I'm guilty, a wretched child of the abyss. Is that something you can forgive? Oh, really? You are no ordinary man. Very well. Besides, I've grown tired of imprisonment. I am Carla, and I accept your proposal.
So Carla here might be a reference to Sully from Dark Souls 2, which is a character only mentioned item descriptions of Alva's set, because Alva's set is right outside the door. And then she might also be a nod to Yuria from Demon Souls, which is not to be confused with Yuria from, you know, Dark Souls 3. But anyway, that's it for today. See you next time. When it's time to go after Yorm the Giant.